Transcripts and recordings of the podcast may not be used for any purpose without the direct written permission of the podcast owner. Welcome to Light It Up, a podcast about resilient women balancing motherhood, their careers, personal lives, and all of the challenges that come along with being a superwoman. Each week, you'll be motivated to take action, to lead, inspire, transform, and empower. Now, here's your host, Dr. Aginah M. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Light It Up. I am your host, Dr. Aginah M. I am so excited for this week's episode. We are now in season 6 of Light It Up, and there are a lot of topics that I like to cover on the podcast, and some are very near and dear to me. And the importance of taking care of one's mental health is certainly a topic that I think all of us can benefit from. So today, my guest is Joshua Barnett. He is a licensed social worker here in the Chicagoland area. Thank you so much for joining me today, Joshua. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. And I am a licensed social worker as of this week. I was certified by the state this week.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank
So
you.
let's kind of dive into how you decided to go into the field of social work, because as we were talking before we came on air, just, briefly covering how social work, you don't see too many men in the field as licensed social workers, let alone Black men in the field. So how did you come to making that choice of going into the field?
So my first experience of doing any social work type of job was back in Iowa, where I went to school at, and I was working as a case manager, and I was helping people who had mental illnesses find resources such as housing. I worked with medication compliance. I dealt with suicidal ideations. I worked at a rehabilitation home, helping them with independent skills they can live on their own. And that became a job where I wanted to only work with my interpersonal skills because I always wanted to work in sports. But once I started working that job, I started realizing that me wanting to be in mental health and sports, that there was far more of a wide range of people in the world who need help with mental health. And when I first moved to Chicago and started working with the youth and started working at a psychiatric hospital, I kept telling people, well, I want to be a therapist. I want to work one-on-one with people. I don't want to do social work. I want to do social work because it had that, I feel like that negative connotation between what social work is that, oh, I'm going to be able just helping people with this, and then I'm going to be sitting at a laptop looking for resources there. And I didn't see that as something I was interested in, not realizing that I've been doing social work since I've started that job. And then I was very well good at it. And when I started finding out that what I knew and what I could experience and bring to the table to help other people, as well as the skills that I've had, that I can help other people with their mental health, then it became something that I said, let me hold off on sports for a while and continue to help people. And by doing that, I started paying attention to my own mental health, because they say some of the best teachers actually learn by helping others. And so I wanted to model how I was helping people and helping myself. So when I found out about social work, I was already doing the work, but I was given a good opportunity by my employer to receive my MSW through a partnership program, and finding out, from my therapist and other people, mental health, that Black men aren't really in that profession. I jumped on an opportunity to receive a higher level of education. And the reason why I did that is because while working at a psychiatric hospital, I felt like I wasn't taken serious as a mental health specialist. And so I was like, instead of being the type of person that's like helping patients and clients and everything, that I would want to be someone that can be hired to help direct and teach people how to treat clients and be a part of creating structures and things like that that can actually help people. So when I got my master's at UIC, I
Mhm.
started finding out that social work is more than just being at the laptop looking up resources. It's more than just looking up resources for people. It's a wide range, whether it's macro or micro, on helping others as individuals or society as a whole, policies. I had no idea how wide ranged social work was. So when I
Mhm.
found out about it, I was actually happy that I decided to receive a higher level education in it.
So, and you mentioned, of course, my alma mater and my place of employment, the University of Illinois at Chicago, where you earned your MSW. In your program, I'm just curious to know, do you recall how many Black men there were in your program, or were you one of a few?
So in the program, the partnership with my employer in UIC, I
Mhm.
was a part of 6 men
Right.
who were given the opportunity to go to UIC to receive my MSW.
Mhm.
In a lot of the classrooms, it was 5 to 6 Black men in there, but there was only because it was those 6 men that was a part of the program. So when we split up and go to different tracks in UIC, I at times was, if not the only Black man in the classroom.
Mhm.
Maybe there might be another guy, but because of that wide range and 6 of us in there, we kind of made it seem like it was more diverse than what it really was.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can only imagine being in that type of environment in terms of I'm going to say being the only one, because I'm sure, sitting in a classroom probably full of women, women of different, race, ethnicity. Sometimes I'm sure you may feel like um there's no one there, honestly, who can relate to what you're going through, or who, in terms of going through the program, the work that you're doing. We always talk about trying to make connections with people. Do you have, I guess, a mentor or someone, another man who's working in the field that you've been able to tap into in terms of, you know, trying to figure out how to navigate this space professionally?
I do. I've had quite a few mentors in the space, and they're actually recent mentors due to the challenges that I faced that I had no idea that I would have to be ready for. One of the most important things about being in social work is, as a Black man, modeling social work. And what I mean by that is every day I go about my life, how I'm helping others, how I move, that I am modeling those same values and characteristics and things that I'm helping people try to live in their lives, or whether it is learning more about, education. So one of
Mhm.
my mentors told me that, in social work, you can be lazy. It could be a profession that you put in what you put into it. And so the more you put in educating yourself about the things around social work and the people you work with and resources, and are constantly working on that, and putting in your effort, that's what you give back for the effort you put into the profession.
Mhm. Okay. Now, in your current role, I know that you're working as a curriculum specialist for Becoming a Man, and which is a program that's facilitated by Youth Guidance. Can you just kind of share with us what exactly is Becoming a Man, and what's the work that you all are really focused on? I'm gonna assume here, since I'm asking questions. I mean, I know a little bit about Becoming a Man. I know that the goal is to work with young males, school age. But can you just talk a little bit about the organization, the structure, and then exactly what your work entails?
So, like you said, a little bit about the Becoming a Man program, but we help at-risk youth and males in a school program on social emotional learning. And one of the biggest things that we work on is working with young men on how to express themselves.
Mhm.
Our core values that we work on is um, self-determination, accountability, integrity, visionary goal setting, respect for womanhood, and last but not least, positive anger expression. And
Mhm.
far as I think visionary goal settings and all
Mhm.
of those things, we work with those men in those core values, and we put them in a curriculum where they're able to work in a group setting among other peers and learn about those core values while having fun, being challenging, and being challenged and respecting others, as well as we work with some of the youth one on one if they might need it. But in that sense, with our young males, which I just talked to a group of males last week, is
Mhm.
as young men, we express ourselves in ways that is sometimes usually anger. And that type of anger leads to actions because we lack the way of knowing how to express ourselves or regulating our emotions. And so, one thing we do at Become a Man program is that curriculum helps them with all of those core values that I mentioned, as well as learning more about themselves. Is becoming a man because even as I work with the young men, I'm still becoming a man. It's a transition and it's a journey that never stops, no matter how old you are, as we're learning about these things.
Mhm.
And those core values fall in the line of the type of transitions that they're making throughout their lives, going into different grades, starting off with things like integrity, knowing what it is to be accountable. And we in my job, in my role now as a curriculum coach, there are counselors that work on those things, but I was promoted. So what my job is now is to make sure that I like to tell the males, you know how this is your counselor. I'm kind of
Mhm.
like his counselor,
Mhm.
making sure that the man that is in the space with these children is the best man that he can be. Making sure that he understands accountability, making sure he understands integrity. Because once we build rapport with these boys and they're
Mhm.
vulnerable with us and they're starting to trust again, it's very important how we act in the space with them. As I mentioned, modeling is important. Modeling is important in the organization because once these boys have this mentorship clinical program, they look up to you. And so you could actually end up ruffling feathers, or depending how you act, they catch on to those things. So I make sure that the counselor is running the curriculum the way it's supposed to be ran.
Mhm.
That while they're going through those six core values, that they're challenging those boys, or not challenging them.
Mhm.
Sometimes understanding when to challenge students, when not to challenge students, when to affirm them, when not to affirm them. How to catch things like something the kid might check in about his life, and catching those things to help you learn a little bit more about clinically assessing the kid, which is all the information they get, making sure that they don't miss those little parts that tell you about the kids that we need to help them work on.
Mhm.
Away from them learning about the curriculum, I work with the counselor and find out where he is on those skill levels. Is he working on listening to the kids? Is he working with the system? You work in a lot of schools in CPS where there are a lot of different type of staff and teachers and principals, making sure that their relationship in those schools are important as well. The teachers are, they have their challenges with the students as well, and so we actually help them with those kids learning to express themselves, learning to build relationship with the school, so they know when we come in that school, although we are a guest in their home, that we're being the best supportive we can be, because the relationships with the adults in that school and how the kids see that is very important to how they even start seeing relationships, from the jump, from the person that's starting to be a mentor. Another thing I do is working with the training academy. So everything that we do with the boys in their spaces, we have the counselors do as well. So we always say there is nothing that we don't challenge these boys on that as men we don't challenge ourselves. So we're able to understand and resonate with them on challenges in our curriculum that we can relate to. So we could say, hey, I remember when I had this situation with accountability. Here's how it resonated with me. And
Mhm.
that's how we decide to disclose or share stories and start building our relationships with them.
How has it been difficult, trying to, there's a stigmatism sometimes, I guess, when it comes to males and working with counselors or social workers, or, were there any challenges, or what have been some of the challenges that you've had to face as far as working with the young males and trying to get them to open up and being receptive to the program?
When I first started, I think one of my biggest challenges, we call it a mentorship and a clinical program. So what
Mhm,
that is you can have a part of being a mentor, which is a kid could look up to you, think you cool, see how you go about yourself. But the clinical part is, am I challenging that kid in a way? And my problem was when I first came to the program, I had a lot of experience in mental health. So
mhm,
yes, I knew how to be clinical with the kid, but how is my youth engagement piece? Am I actually being an adult that can sell himself that a kid would want to speak to me?
mhm,
Do I come off too serious?
mhm,
Or how do I enjoy myself with the students as an adult and still at the same time do my job as a clinician and a person that's trying to challenge the kid and open up in areas and make it at the perfect angle where I'm not doing too much. Here's I'm your counselor and I'm not doing too much. Here I'm your buddy and your friend. And one
mhm,
of my challenges was I wasn't doing enough of the in youth engagement. I
oh,
was so busy on trying to be accepted as an adult in the
mhm,
youth's world
mhm,
that allowed me to remove myself away from being my true authentic self, which
mhm,
made kids kind of see through you, and they will.
mhm.
And in that, kids might not have been a part of my program because it seemed like it was going to be boring. And I mentioned earlier, we challenge the kids. We make sure that it's about respect, but I did say fun.
Okay.
So it's nice to learn things and also have fun, especially at that age. And it seemed like I was just going to be all questions, questions, questions. So I think that challenge was learning how to be myself, even
Mhm.
though I know that I can do the mental health work with the youth.
Now, what's the age group or age range of the students that the organization works with that you all work
They start at seventh
with?
through 12.
Okay. Now,
But I do know that I do know, and I feel like it might go a little bit younger, which I think it should,
mm,
but from my knowledge, definitely we're going 7 through 12.
so let's kind of talk about that in terms of, with everything that's going on. We hear a lot now, since the pandemic, the number of children, students who are dealing with mental health, a mental health crisis, essentially is what it is. Um, and you and I talked a few weeks ago because I, talked to you about um, how, for example, students who are in college and how they've struggled. You have high school and middle school students, of course, who are struggling with their mental health and just being able to handle some of life's challenges. Um, Whereas, I mean, I'll probably be dating myself during my time 30 years ago. That, of course, was not something that you hear about, as far as so many young people experiencing a mental health crisis. Um, what do you think has played a role in, and I know every situation is different, every individual is unique, but for there to be such a prevalence um, of, the mental health crisis going on right now, what do you think is playing a role in that? And what can adults do to help their children who may be struggling?
So, you mean as far as like the pandemic on to now, or because I know we talked a little bit about that?
Yeah, because it just seems like since the pandemic, once we've returned to a quote unquote normal, which really things still aren't normal. With this, there was an increase of students who were experiencing a mental health crisis during the pandemic because of being shut in, being completing school online in a remote environment. Many were isolated, so not being able to have that social interaction. But even now that we're back in person, back in the classrooms, there's still that struggle. And I'm just curious to know, professionally, what are your thoughts about what has played a role in this?
Well, what I think played a role is as far as like the pandemic. Actually, uh, during the pandemic, actually suicide attempts actually decreased. And what I would like to think about is that kids are at home. Unfortunately, the financial hardships are there, but parents are home, and those relationships, seem to might have gotten better, or kids got the support they needed as far as mental health, is being advertised, and more support being there during the pandemic. As
Mhm.
far as now, the kids structure is really important. Now, one of my colleagues was talking about the other day how, during the pandemic, kids wake up, they have to get on a laptop, and then they don't really want to do that. And in school, we have structure. We have the periods you're supposed to go to the classrooms. You have your lunch period, and so it's that school life that everyone was used to. But taking kids out of that for 2 years, and
Mhm.
then putting them in an environment. I mean, some kids were actually like 2 years in high school years, but not really in high school. And
Right.
so, what does that look like to be around their peers and so many kids with so many personalities, with all of that going on, and not being used to that type of structure?
Mhm.
Which made it a little harder on staff at schools, because kids had a lot more energy, and it was all over the place. And so in that case, with that going on, kids lacking that structure, they struggle to find um, ways to, like I said, regulate their emotions through everything that's going on, such as handling conflict and being told to do certain things like get out of the hallway. That's always been an issue within the schools, but it's a little bit harder when that's their first experience in a long time with the school. So the
Mhm.
habit of being in a structured environment where they have to class and be in the hallways, um, it's exacerbated by the absence of it.
Mhm. Okay. Now, are there any, I guess, are there any signs that a parent should look for um, when trying to determine whether their child is actually experiencing any type of um, um, mental health crises, or if there's a need for help? Are there specific or key signs that one should look for in terms of determining whether or not they need to seek some type of support for their child, aside from the child saying, I need help?
One thing I can just say is just have an open ear and willing to listen.
Mhm.
One thing that, when you're looking for situations, and we look for suicidal ideations, not that it's has to come to that severity of that, though, is just listening.
Mhm.
I believe that many parents and students have told me in situations where they wanted their parent to listen, we always say listen non-judgmentally, right? And as a parent, I know it is really hard to listen and hear the things that your child is saying and not want to jump in or have a judgment about what you would do or what you think they should do or how you even feel about what they just told you. As a parent, as you love them, you have a response, because that's your child. And
Right.
not knowing that in some situations, the way that you respond might be a way that that child at that point decides, okay, this is a topic that I cannot talk to my parent about. And
Mhm.
what happens is, as they go on through life, and more challenges, if not similar to that, comes up, they feel like they have just lost a support system because of the judgment or the feeling that they're not supported in a need versus being judged for a decision that they made. And it's not like a parent doesn't have, obviously can't say what they want to say to their child about it, but the
Mhm.
things and topics that they discuss, when they decide to open up, just be willing to listen more than speak about the subject. Because at that chance, they probably are looking for just a listening ear and a guidance. And sometimes they kind of already feel nervous speaking to a parent about it because they know you, and because they know you, they know how you would respond.
Mhm.
And so when they open up, surprise them by like literally just listening and just supporting them and thanking them for opening up to you. I mean, I know these might sound like simple duh things, but at the same
Mhm.
time, they can be overlooked,
Yeah.
especially if you're a parent and you have a lot going on in your life.
Mhm.
You might not be fully there, and
Mhm.
kids know that, and they understand that, and they actually see that, and what they do is go at that moment and say, all right, I'm not bringing this up again.
Mhm.
And chances are you might have been that last, if not the only support that they had on that subject. And depending on what that subject is, things could get worse. They can obsess about it. And when you're obsessing over thoughts and things that are stressing you out and you don't have a support or anyone to talk to, it
Mhm.
wears down on your brain,
Mhm.
and you continue to feel bad about it. And depending on the subject, it can make you sadder, stressed. And then that's when depression start kicking in. And that's when you start noticing the child is not the same around the house, or the kid is acting different. So when you start noticing different patterns, as a parent, like
Mhm.
appetite, not getting sleep, you feel like they're not hanging out with people as much, that's a good time to just sit down and, you know, ask if they have anything on their mind. And honestly, I don't even think there's nothing wrong as a parent just saying, hey, I'm just going to listen to you. I'm not going to say anything because, like I said earlier, they know their parents, they know their mom and dad, they know their guardians, and
Mhm.
they're around you. So they kind of already anticipate how you're going to respond, which is
Mhm.
the reason why they don't say anything to you, or the
Mhm.
reason why they say only some things to you.
Mhm.
But by a parent listening and assuring and letting the child know, hey, I just want to listen. I just want to know what's going on in that way, and actually be attentive and there. That makes a big difference. You can come from work and just have a stressful day at work and just be over the day.
Mhm.
And then your child comes to you about something that's probably bothering them, but it's really hard to, while you're dealing what you're dealing with, to sit down and say, all right, I know I had my day, but what's going on with my baby, right?
Mhm.
Many times we do things unintentionally in a way that we don't know how it impacted us as a supporter, as a listener, as a parent.
Mhm.
And those are the type of things that makes kids isolate themselves or continue to hold in all the things that they're dealing with and just let it build up on their own.
So you kind of struck a nerve, only because as I'm listening to you, I am thinking about a couple of things. So I'm thinking about my own upbringing and in terms of my relationship with my parents and whether or not there were certain things that I felt comfortable with sharing with them or not, because I knew how the response would be. And then thinking about my own relationship with my children who say, well, I know not to bring this up because I know how your response is going to be. Um, which, it can be, I think that just like a child expects their parent to be supportive, and be there for them when they need them to be, as an adult, you have certain expectations of your child as well. And what I mean by that is if you've opened up the door to give them an opportunity to talk to you about something, or you say, hey, I've noticed, like when you try to engage in conversation and see what's going on and probe, but then they still don't want to talk to you. Um, you have to, it's sometimes it could be a little bit of a challenge to then be, when they're ready to talk, be open and ready to talk, especially if they catch you at the wrong time, Or even when you're being open and honest and not trying to make excuses, but when you're open and honest with your children and sharing with them, you know, you're under a significant amount of stress or pressure as it is. Here's what's going on. Can you give me a minute? But then they still take that the wrong way. It's not that you're trying to reject them, but you are acknowledging that you need to be in a certain space to even be able to hear them out or listen to what it is that they're saying. So it's almost like sometimes it could be difficult for the parent and the child to be on the same page at the same time. How do you navigate that? Because it's almost like it becomes one-sided where, the child has this expectation that when I'm ready to talk, you need to, be willing to listen. And then when the parent wants to talk, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and then a question I'll ask you is,
Mhm.
do you ever come back to that conversation?
Yes.
Because
Mhm.
okay, so
There there's there's an effort to try to come back to it, but then if they don't want to talk about it, I don't believe in forcing a person to talk about something because it seems like then that just causes more tension than there needs to be. So, but then when there are times where, that child will come back and ready to talk and I'm in a good space and I'm going to listen and talk, and be open and available. But it's I don't know, it's almost like playing Russian roulette sometimes,
it is, it
different
is.
emotions.
It is, and I am not an expert in parenting, and I am not a parent myself, and that's what people would probably come right back to is he don't know what it's like to be a dad. You know
Mhm,
what? I don't. But one
mhm,
thing I am learning is some things or maybe what not to do that hopefully I can distill. But
yeah,
I know it's hard, and so in that, I think awareness is just the best thing that I can offer a parent. It's just like as long as you're aware that you know timing might not be right, as
mhm,
long as you're aware that lately I haven't had the space to ask them what's on their mind, and I didn't leave it lingering too long, right?
mhm,
As long as I'm aware that I'm still open up, and obviously if they don't want to open up, fine, but open that up one more time. Hey, I
yeah,
know we haven't talked. I know you don't want to talk, but when you have an opportunity, I'm here. Believe it
mhm,
or not, those type of things do go through their head. You
mhm,
might not think it because at the moment it's not accepted, and it's so hard to offer something and someone not take it and
mhm,
you not take it personal.
yeah,
and so in that, it's so easy to make it about you now at that moment, right?
mhm,
I've done everything. I've talked to him. It won't open up. Well, it won't open up. Well, fine, right?
mhm,
You start really feeling it. And again, I said it earlier. It's because you love them and caring for them and want to be that support. But sometimes the best support, which sucks, is what I don't know, say what waiting on that moment and
mhm,
it just clicks. But there's still nothing wrong with saying, I know you don't want to talk about it, but I'm just letting you know that I'm here if you want to.
mhm,
And continue to, just give that support. And I believe that it will ring. At one point, they will go, she said I could talk to her about this. Let me see what happens.
yeah,
Uh, Continuing to enforce more of that, I'm here if you need me. I know
mhm,
we haven't. I'm here. Is I believe that they do hear that. And depending on what goes on, they do look at that as an option when they are going through things.
mhm,
And with it being repeated, it's hard not to hear that. My mom said, "Talk to me if she need her." My mom said, "Talk to me if she need her."
yeah,
And you'll get that one day where it's like a whoosh, it's like a whole bunch of things, and it's like, "How you doing holding that in?" But continue to just encourage and let them know that that support is there. Will always, I believe, ring in their heads when they do need it, as well as sometimes if they feel like I don't want to talk about it now. I want to talk about it now. It's like, well, look, I just want to let you know I'm here if you need me. So at
yeah,
that point, they won't feel like, well, I don't talk to her about it, so I know she's gonna be mad about it if I bring it up again. Or you don't ever say nothing. Why do you say something now? So it's like even in their heads, they're like, I've already had my opportunities to speak, and I didn't say anything, so they don't want to say anything. And that's why I said it helps to continue to encourage and
mhm,
repeat it. It might sound a little bit tedious, but those little things do help because kids do listen
yeah,
and they play back in their head the supports that people said that they had when times get rough. It's
Mm,
just they don't do it when you expect it or you got time for it. But I think that's just the way it works with kids.
yeah, clearly, clearly that is the case. And it actually makes me think about, I do know someone who lost their child to suicide a year ago. And, I that is, and I sat down and I actually had a conversation with my children about that situation, saying there is nothing, um, you know, that I think is that challenging that should make you want to resort to that, and know that whatever you need, I'm there for you, try to talk to me. And just thinking about the friend of mine who lost her son, she of course has played back over and over, and what did I miss, what could I have done differently, when I noticed that there was something that wasn't right. I tried to get my child the help that they needed, and I thought that they were making progress, thought they were fine, so then it becomes this, almost like you blame yourself because you feel like there was something that you missed because you couldn't save your child. Um, and I just honestly couldn't imagine, that's got to be the worst feeling ever, to lose your child. And so I'm just, because we've talked about, people having suicidal thoughts. And that was one of the conversations that you and I had before we scheduled this interview, this conversation, was because there was a huge increase. I'm going to say a huge increase. I don't know if it was a huge increase or not, but on the college campus, where my son and daughter attend school, of students the first semester alone that either posted a suicidal message on social media or ended up taking their life within the first month of the semester there, and then thereafter, even up to the last couple of weeks before the semester ended. And um, the availability or the resources for mental health professionals, um, just considering the number of young people who are dealing with so many different things, and not being able to get to a counselor in enough time, having to be placed on a waiting list to be able to see someone. And at that point, you know, could potentially be too late. Um, Again, what are some of the signs that one should look for um, to determine whether or not someone is struggling with their mental health?
And I do want to say one thing that we talked about earlier when we was talking about like you talking to your children if they don't say anything to you. One thing I do want to encourage is if you're not the person, you
Mhm,
just happen to be the parent. The closest thing, to the heart and bringing them in this world, if they don't for some reason trust you,
mhm,
which is a hard pill to swallow with what they're going through.
mhm,
Encouraging them to talk to someone that they do trust.
mhm,
Someone, sometimes it might be a teacher over the parent. Sometimes it might be a closest friend over the parent. Sometimes, whatever it is, it's okay. Well, whoever you do trust, can you talk to them about what's going on? Because I don't want you to feel like you don't have someone.
mhm,
It's hard. It takes a lot for a parent to go, I know you're not going to share this with me, but if it's anyone that you trust,
mhm,
do you trust, do you have anybody that you can trust? So that's also important too to ask that question, because if it's yes, then you will at least know that there's some support out there that they do have.
mhm,
And if it's no, then you can offer any support. Well, if you can't talk to me, Will you talk to a professional about it?
Mhm.
Or as I just want you to be able to feel supported and get this out so you don't hold it in and, continue to make yourself feel better than it is. I would want you to share with me, but if you can't, find
Mhm.
someone that you trust, or if you don't have no one you can trust, let's work together and find a professional that you can talk to. So, also, if you're not the resource, then looking for resources or finding out if they do have a resources and encouraging to use it if it's not you.
Okay, got it. And there are oh, go ahead. What are you gonna
As far
say?
as things to look for, because you mentioned kids on college campuses, one thing as there was a student that I lost. I was his secondary counselor
Mhm.
about 2 or 3 years ago, and I I do know what it feels like to have clients. And I've had multiple clients that has attempted suicide and completed it. And
Mhm.
so when you mentioned that guilt is a part of the grieving process, the bargaining part, one of the stages after anger, what could I've done? Why did I look for the signs as a mental health professional? How did I not know what was going on? And one of the things that I noticed the last day I told that student goodbye, which is something that you can look for, is hygiene.
Mhm.
When a person is feeling depressed or feeling like they're hopeless, their routines change. They stop taking care of themselves physically. Sometimes they might stop. They don't bathe. Sometimes they don't eat. The appetite is a little bit different, and I know that's hard to find out, right, if your kid is away. But like I said, that strong relationship is just little subtle things like that. Have you been eating? It's like, well, I just ate this yesterday. Why haven't you been eating? Have you been sleeping? The sleeping patterns are off as well when working. When kids or students are away, they don't sleep well, and sometimes that could deal with the stress from finals. But also, when kids leave to college,
Mhm.
they life didn't slow down. Their issues that they might have had mentally did not slow down. So if they had trauma when they left home, they have trauma in college.
Mhm.
If they struggled with identity issues or they socially isolated, maybe college might bring that out, or maybe it's worse on a larger scale. Um, when kids, leave the very people that support them and they're still struggling, they've officially lost interaction with that support system to fight, despite the fact you can talk on the phone or FaceTime. So it's nothing like that presence of the person. So although when kids leave college, they have those resources on campus, sometimes being used to those resources is new. These people new. You have to build a whole new trust and a whole new trust system if you already struggle to find support and people to trust before you left to go on campus. Uh, you know, many work talking about like Black men and mental health. The resources I realize as I work in social work, they're there, but a man has to be brave enough to use those resources, have to be brave enough to say, I do need help. I am struggling. So those resources are there and they can be on campus all they want to, but the student still has to be brave enough to reach out to a stranger because they're strangers, use those resources, not feel pressured. There is a such thing as in this world with mental health that's going on and being a thing that people feel pressured about mental health, and being pressured and pushed to work on your issues actually might exacerbate the issue.
Mhm.
So not pushing, oh, you need help, that doesn't help a person. They understand that they need help. So when students are leaving away from home, depending on the support system, they're losing those support systems. They're learning to trust again. They're on their own and they're carrying things with them by themselves that they still might not have helped or reconciled with.
Mhm.
Um, Along with the hygiene and the sleeping, sometimes how they acting. You could somebody could be sad this week, and you notice all of a sudden they seem to be very joyful the next
Mhm.
week or the next couple of weeks. Something to really look out for is like all of this. What happened?
Yeah.
that made you all of a sudden just feel happy about the world? Like, what's going on? Talking about those things, and that's an absence in that complete energy change from you sad this week to now you're all happy. What's going on? Because some of those signs are right before a person decides to have those thoughts,
Mm.
or unfortunately attempt suicide, that they had a huge it's like they was accepting what they were going to do,
Yeah.
and and because they're accepting what they were going to do, it's kind of like that last hoorah of their life to not feel sad about what they're going to do. And
Mm.
so in that sense, when that happens, they're accepting that they're gonna attempt it. And it's hard to catch that, because if a person is feeling that joyful and happy, the last thing that we would think is that they're better.
Yeah.
And that's why it's tricky. And those one of the trickiest signs too, that people don't pay attention to, the sudden change of mood. And you want them to be happy, but now all of a sudden you forget, like, why are you so happy? Those type of things. It's not easy to catch someone and think someone's going to do that after they was just showing you love and calling you, but sometimes that is like a goodbye,
Yeah.
and it's
You
hard.
what you just with you saying that just made me think about, and now I can't honestly, his name escapes me because I didn't know who he was previously, but the young man who was the dancer, he was from the Ellen DeGeneres show.
Twitch.
Twitch, yeah. So show you how out of touch I am. I had no idea who he was, to be honest with you. But I recall reading posts or people saying the video, he made a TikTok video with his wife, like I think maybe the day before he committed suicide. And I just recall seeing all of those comments about he looked so happy and he had
Hmm.
just made this video, that definitely immediately when, as you said, that's what, made me think about that, because that is the last thing publicly that people saw, that he looked like, everything was, you know, going well. He was in good spirit. But that's interesting. I don't think I've ever thought about it in a way where that person, because they've had these thoughts about what they're going to do, then at that point in time, they're at the acceptance
It's
state.
having an answer. It's having an answer to your issues,
Yeah.
all your problems. They go away. And on the subject of Twitch, I read something about him mentioning something like his past issues or something in his past bothering him.
Mhm.
And I know someone that recently, has tried to commit suicide. And one thing that they disclosed to me was something about their past.
Mhm.
And when talk to you about college students and going to college, and I say they take things with them,
Mhm.
how are they able when those things come up? What if they're nightmares? What if they're thoughts in the head? How do they cope with those things? And now, most importantly, how do they cope with it where their system that was helping them cope with it is
Mhm.
now gone?
Mhm.
And what I meant by gone is, yes, they can call, but it's different. It's different being far away from home, dealing with those struggles. And so, one thing that person that disclosed to me about their attempt at suicide was they had a lot of unresolved trauma that built up over time. And the
Mhm.
thing with trauma, as it build up over time, is sometimes it can be fuel to current fire. If life is already hard enough, then
Mhm.
the current trauma that you haven't dealt with, the grief that you might have still not really dealt with or processed, it does nothing but make it worse, along with your current issue. And now, because that's unresolved. And another thing about the pandemic I didn't bring up is grief. We lost a lot of important people, especially the older age populations, like grandmas, grandpas, that's the rock of the family. And with them, passing away, the support, that rock that were needed. It was a support that people had lifted from under them at a time where it seemed like we would need them the most. And
Right.
so with that type of leadership, with that love, with all that gone as well, um, people are still struggling with how to grieve over that. And so when you have your current issues, with your unresolved past issues and trauma, it's easy for those things to come together at a point in time and just overwhelm you.
Mm, yeah. That's really deep and heavy, to be honest with you. It really, really is. Um,
Also, another thing, since we were just talking about college students, and I'll share this with myself,
mm,
um, because it comes from experience. I had a lot of trauma that I was dealing with going into college. And you know what happens is in college, you study, you party, there's a
mhm,
lot of substances
mhm.
involved.
Right.
If a college student has a lot of unresolved trauma or issues coming into a town that in an environment where people drink and party and that could temporarily, leave your issues behind, sometimes that's where substance abuse comes in. And that's when you temporarily try to find ways to deal with your pain away from studying. So I'm gonna
Mm,
go out with friends. I'm gonna go
mhm,
out with friends, I'm gonna drink. And that is not a healthy way to deal with any issues that you might be dealing with when you're leaving 300, 200, 800 miles away from home.
mhm,
And those type of behaviors, depending on the person over time, it could wear them down, it could destroy them. And not knowing what's going on when they're that far away and handling those things and being in an environment where there's a lot of trauma bonding, hurt kids hang around hurt kids and they party and nothing really gets resolved as far as what they're all dealing with. Now I'm not saying that's not all college students, but I'm just speaking from what if I was a college student that had something going on back home and I brought it to college with me and I didn't really know how to deal with it. So let's drink, let's party, woo, and I'm with my friends and depending on what the substance does to me, I might be emotional at the end of the night. There might be a lot of anger that might end up coming up. I might end up actually feeling worse had I, decided to do a drug or drink alcohol. And now I'm relying on it to help me cope with when I'm feeling that way while I'm in this environment. And I think
mhm.
that's very important to mention because, you wonder what the kids are doing when they're away from home. It is nice to party, it is nice to enjoy yourself, but why are you doing it?
Right.
And it's important because it's one thing to have fun, it's another thing to run away from your problems and indulge in things that will temporarily take your mind off of them and you get back into it every time they arise.
Mhm. And that's, as a parent of two college age students, I like to think that we have open conversations. I mean, of course, I don't know if they're telling me everything, but for the most part, I think I have a general idea of what's going on, although I know that there are some things that I don't know. But even before sending them off to school, there were so many things that we talked about. We talked about, the type of environment they're going to be in and selecting who they associate themselves with because you feed off of,
Hmm.
other people's energy, right? We even talked about, I think probably with all of my children, from the age of middle school where they were going to birthday parties, with classmates or what have you, I've always talked to them about not leaving your cup unattended. So it wasn't just like in high school and college, even in middle age, because we know that students or children, young people have access to all sorts of substances now. It is not something that just starts in high school or college. But we've, talked about that. And um, I think that you, I can say that I've tried to learn from my own parents parenting style and try to incorporate that which I thought was good and was beneficial in helping me be a decent human being, and modifying that aspect of their parenting skills that maybe made me feel a little bit closed off and not wanting to openly, share certain things. But parenting is trial and error. There is really no, concrete manual, because parenting styles it's based upon the child that you're dealing with too. But you've touched on a lot of very good points. And one thing that comes to mind is with you saying that for students who are going away to school or who have gone away to school, if they've experienced some sort of trauma before they left, and so something from their past, and I'm just thinking about what, obviously, you don't necessarily want to hold your child back, right? But how do you know, and this is more probably of a rhetorical question, how do you know that your child is in a good space to be able to leave that support system that they have and to go off into this, new environment? One of the things that I tried to do, and not saying that my method is one that was perfect, but I think I caught a lot of, I'm not going to say slack, but feedback from people, because this past fall semester, I saw my son and daughter at least once a month, even though they go to school in Greensboro, North Carolina. So it didn't matter if it was from the drop off was in August, a month later in September, I was there on their campus, because in my mind, I felt like 30 days was like sufficient time for me to, need to do a wellness check, pop-up check. And without going into a whole lot of detail, turns out I was right. It was the perfect timing for me to be there within those 30 days, just to, make sure. Are you keeping up with your routine? If you were working out every day when you were here at home, you need to do that here. You don't need to just go to class and come back to your room with, the blinds closed, not getting out, socializing and interacting. Like, that reminder needed to be set, because there were some things I could just tell the patterns, had changed. And then they were home for fall break. If there was an opportunity for them to come home, although it has cost me a lot of money with the airfare, but just getting them back to a place of familiarity, being around family, so that they can be refueled to keep going, I think was something that was I felt was important, because they are 10 to 12 hours away. And I know in talking to other parents, everyone's not able to do that. And it was a sacrifice for me to do that. But there are some families that when their child turns 18 and they send them to school, they say, that's it, you're on your own, you're an adult. But no, not really. Sure, legally, you're 18 and you're, considered to be an adult, but that doesn't mean that you don't still need that family support. And I've just learned how to, my parenting style has started to change with them, whereas it's more of, I guess, an advisor, consultant, so to speak, because I've made it clear, I can't dictate what you do when you're 12 hours away. I can track your whereabouts, but what am I going to do? I can't call you on the phone and say, hey, get back to that dorm room. It's too,
Yeah,
but
and And I think as a parent, you're doing an amazing job. You've mentioned so many things already that unfortunately some parents don't do or they don't have the resources or ability to do. I think one thing that you said that stand out to me the most that I think is very like um, underestimated in the value is that you said your parenting style, depending on the child, and you look at your own way that you was raised. And we always say this thing in band when we're processing things with the students. Okay, what's working and what's not working? If that's not
Right.
working, why? If that's working, why? You're looking at what worked for you and what you don't want to do. When you raise your own. And even you working with the routines, you're noticing some of the routines off, and you're encouraging some of those things with the routines. And when you mention things about when the child is 18, they leave the house. It's like actually that's probably when they need you the most because if one thing that this pandemic has taught us is when these kids are removed from a routine,
Mhm.
um, sometimes they might lose control and they might need guidance more than ever because now I've been used to this for 18 years.
Right.
I'm supposed to figure it out.
Mhm.
And sometimes that can actually make some people feel lost.
Yeah.
And, you could think as a child so many things like they don't love me no more. They waiting for me to move out. Kids and people interpret things very differently than how we say them. And
Mhm.
it's really important on how we say them because as I mentioned earlier when you was talking about um, how to get one of your kids to open up. It's like
Mhm.
how you say those things to them really matter, and the attitude, the tone, and I know you're, a parent will say, "I talk to my child whenever, however I want." That's true. I'm not saying nothing wrong with that, but I am saying that they pay attention to those things,
Mhm.
and how that is interpreted is very important to how much they remember and
Mhm.
did they feel the love in that message or did it come off nonchalant? Because if it came off nonchalant, then I don't care what you said.
Right.
And by you going there to, on the campus, it was like, something's off. Your
Mhm.
mommy senses was tingling, but also at the same time, you know about the routine. It's important to encourage if that's working for your kids. And if they seem to fall off, why you're not doing that anymore. Now,
Mhm.
there's reasons for everything, but sometimes it's nice to evaluate those things because chances are those subtle things, those little things right there will actually tell you more about your kid or a child or a college student's mental state more than you know.
Mhm. Well, I hope honestly that, for those who are tuned in, that there's something, that they can take from our conversation and, be able to apply it to their life, their situation. Obviously, we're not going to be able to give all of the answers in a short period of time, but I think just being open and willing to engage in the conversation is very important. And also to, give some folks some things to think about and to look at and to reevaluate. Because I know there, are some things just in listening to what you were saying that I also need to reevaluate, in particular with my youngest child, because there's there's as a parent, you want your child to do well. You want them to be in a really good place. And I think for the most part, all parents want their children to do better than them. Um, and, when you find yourself in a situation where you have a child that may not be meeting their maximum potential or may be closed off and you don't know why, like that is certainly, hurtful. So, of course, you want to try to do whatever you can. And maybe your approach is not working. So, you've got to look at what's another approach that you can take so that you can make some type of headway and breakthrough.
And
Um,
one thing that helped me is mental health first aid. I think that's mentalhealthfirstaid.org. They call it algae. And
mhm,
algae has actually helped me with people who was having suicidal ideations. And so algae stands for assess for risk of suicidal harm. L, listen non-judgmentally. G's, give reassurance and information. E, encourage appropriate professional help. and also E again, encourage self-help and other supports. And I think uh, during this talk today, we've actually gotten to every single one of those things, but those are what they are in order
Mhm.
as far as um, feeling the feeling about the suicidal ideations, and just make it a part of a conversation. One thing that I was afraid of about a friend that wanted to commit suicide was afraid to actually ask someone, are they going to kill themselves? Do you have a plan? That is really hard to ask, because once someone tells you, how you respond next is hard and very important, because some people will actually tell you. Some people actually have a plan. Some people have thought about it for a very long time. So when hesitate asking those questions and how uncomfortable they are, might actually have someone say, well, actually I have, and when those conversations come up, let them know whether you're uncomfortable or not.
Mhm.
And like I said, try to find another help or support, rather than you just feeling like you have to give an answer. Sometimes all you need to do is just listen, and just listening for that 5 to 10 minutes of someone uninterrupted, just get it off their chest, is enough to improve someone's mental state, because it's inside of them. They thought about it, they obsessed over it, and they felt alone. And
Mhm.
by just getting that out to one person willing to listen, makes someone feel a lot better. So, and 40,000 people died by suicide in 2020. There was one death in every 11 minutes. But one thing I want to bring to attention is that 12.2 million people thought about it, 13.2 made a plan, and 1.2 million attempted suicide. So that just by lets you know how often and just how common life is, very overwhelming for people to think about just ending their lives. And I was talking to my mentor about this, and I asked him this question, and it stuck to my head. The more as suicide increase, does that make many people comfortable about doing it? So
Mhm.
one thing is interesting is that this world is a trending society,
Yeah.
and as much as mental health is prevalent right now,
Mhm.
suicide attempts and the success is also. And so for years, people in life gets overwhelming for many people. And some people are miserable for the rest of their lives. And I believe that one person just said, I'm just going to end it all here. And as it increased, it's like someone raising their hand in the classroom, right? Everybody has a question.
Mhm.
As it increased, many people, to end their pain, decided to take that way out. And the common uh, way of death is normally a violent one, by a gun.
Yeah.
Um, but I will say the good news is that more than 90% of the people who attempt suicide and survive, they go on to die, and it's not by suicide. So if we could just continue to keep doing what we're doing, having those conversations about mental health, but also not being afraid to talk about something like killing yourself, suicide, because it can be really hard to ask a friend that you might be thinking about that they're killing themselves, and you want to give yourself the benefit of the doubt that
Mhm.
that's absurd, it's extreme, that it's ridiculous that you would think that. But I personally can say, if you're thinking about asking, don't be afraid to ask, because they just might tell you. And when they do, just listen. Chances are they needed to get that off their chest. And sometimes that actually might be what a person needs to no longer think about it again.
Wow, that is something to, to really think about, because I don't know if I guess now I'm thinking about, how do you, aside from listening, like if you ask the question and be prepared to listen, then how do you, I guess, move forward from that point after you received a response that maybe you weren't prepared for?
Um, then I would encourage that person to talk to someone about it. A
Mhm.
person that's listening to someone tell them that they thought about killing themselves, vicarious trauma is real. That's a painful experience for someone to have to endure hearing that a loved one or something they care about doesn't want to be here. And so you shouldn't take that in and go, oh, maybe you also need to talk to a professional, because it's the uncomfortability with that, depending on how you hear it, how it comes off, where talking to a professional, and maybe you need to get that out how you made that person feel. I
Mhm.
was talking to a friend of the day that said the first someone they know, and they had kids, and they go, um, didn't you think about your kids? What about your kids? Would you want to take your life? And this is just my own perspective or thought from that is, if I'm thinking about killing myself and you
Mhm.
want to tell me about my children, you
Mhm.
still at that point have taken the conversation away from me
Yeah.
and made it about my children.
Mhm.
So right away, what you didn't mean to do is you moved the conversation further away from me, letting
Yeah.
me know that um, I don't matter.
Mm.
And although those are your children, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
What about me? Because at the same time, and even as you are a parent, you still have your own life to live as well. So,
Yeah. Wow. Well, I certainly thank you for taking the time to just initiate and engage in this level of conversation. I would love to have you back so that we could talk about some other things more in depth that I didn't get a chance to ask you about. So if you're willing, would love to have you come back again as a guest on the podcast. You have shared some very insightful information that I really think that the listeners will be able to benefit from. I do want to encourage those who are listening and viewing that if you are struggling and are thinking about taking your life, or if you are in a crisis, that you can always, there's a hotline 988 that you can call 24 hours a day for to talk to someone if there is no one readily available for you to talk to in person. So I definitely want to encourage everyone to make sure you keep note of that number. It's 988. There are individuals available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to help you during a time of crisis.
and
Um,
I think is that the same as 1-800-273-8255, the
yep.
National Suicide Hotline. You can also text them if you don't feel like calling, and 24/7 there is someone there to talk to.
Yep. So that's 1-800-273-8255.
8255.
8255. Okay. So either one of those numbers you can call. Please talk to someone. And please, if you feel like you need to um, get the resources or help, make sure that you reach out to a licensed social worker or a licensed professional counselor to get the help and support that you need. Joshua, I want to thank you so much for being my guest today on Light It Up. It was a pleasure learning from you, and thank you so very much for the wealth of information that you were able to share with us today. I
Oh,
really
thank
appreciate
you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. I was like a little nervous, but one thing I'm learning in this work is that the experience I have and the education that I have is not just for me, it's for other people. And so I realize that it's not about me, it's about helping other people. And that is my passion and my reason why that I am in social work, and why I decide to continue to learn more and be an advocate for mental health. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about my expertise and share a few experiences that I hope can reach anybody, if not just one person that listens to this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Light It Up. I hope you can join me next week for another episode. Um, in the meantime, please remember to continue to light it up and shine bright like a diamond. See you next week. Thanks for joining me this week on Light It Up. Make sure you visit my website at www.lightituppodcast.com or www.aginahmuhammad.com. You can also find me on social media using the handle @LightItUpPodcast. If you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or you can simply tell a friend about the show. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a new episode. Until next time, light it up and shine bright like a diamond.